if you guys tuned into the last webinar, we're doing the webinar this time on array mesh. So it should be some good stuff. We're going to go through some quick news items first. So the first thing we have is the webinars. So if you guys tuned in last time to the last webinar, or if you did not, we have the replay up for that on our page here at ZBrush Central. So you can go through here and you can watch this. And this is the entire hour and a half of the webinar that we did on ZModeler. So if you guys did not participate in the first one, it is on ZBrush Central. You can just do a search for the webinar recap and it'll come up. It's also on our YouTube page and you can go and watch that there. Next news item is the summit. Summit again this year is September 30th to October 2nd. Once again, this is a free event. You can come out and it's free. You can go watch all the presentations and do all that stuff and it's free. So just to clarify that, I've had a few people come up and talk to me. They want to know how much it costs to go to the summit. And the only thing we're charging for is the on-site workshops, and those have limited space, and we have not announced those yet. But the summit itself is free, so you can come out and talk to other fellow ZBrush users and participate in all the panels and things like that. So it's a great time. So if you guys are in LA or just want to make a trip to LA, now's the time to do it. So September 30th through October 2nd. Now with the summit, we're also doing the ZBrush Awards again. And these awards are all based around art that is on ZBrush Central. So if you want to partake in the ZBrush Awards, make sure you post on ZBrush Central. To vote for an image on ZBrush Central, all you have to do is click this little vote button, and it's going to tally your vote. And then the categories are going to be determined after all the votes are made, and then the awards will be given out as such. So just go to ZBrush Central, find any images you like, and just click vote, and you'll cast your vote there. In addition to the awards, we have revamped the Z Classroom. So it is totally revamped. We have all the videos up here. If you were in the last webinar, Paul went over some of this, but one of the nice things about this is there's a robust searching process now, so you can search by all sorts of different things. And also when you start and stop a video, it's going to remember where you left off. So as long as you are logged in and you start a video, you can come back later and you'll have a video queue, and then you can return to that video right where you left off. So really handy usage with the new Z Classroom for more training and tutorials on ZBrush. And there's a lot of good basic and beginner stuff on here. So a lot of fun stuff there. The summit will be in LA, that is correct. It's going to be at the our headquarters in LA, which is right inside where Noman is, right next to Noman. So, and finally, unless I'm missing anything else,
call for submissions.
Oh, yes. Missed it. So in addition to the summit, we are looking for candidates for the Sculpt Off this year. So if you go to our summit page at summit.pixelogic.com and we scroll through here, we're looking for artists to participate in the Sculpt Off. So you can just click this button to answer the call, and there'll be this little sheet you fill out here for an artist submission, and you can come out and compete in the Sculpt Off. So right now we have, we're looking for more people for the hard surface category. So if you have a particularly specialized usage of ZBrush for hard surface, make sure you submit.
Yeah, we're still taking organic too. So either organic or hard surface. And then just keep in mind, you can only use ZBrush to do your work. And then we allow at the tail end for your render to use Keyshot or use Photoshop to compile your renders from ZBrush. But you're going to be in ZBrush the majority of the time, and then our man,
yes, and it'll all be
Joseph just does play-by-play.
Yes, so you get to hear my voice while you sculpt. Actually, they're usually too busy to hear.
They're listening to music,
but it will be broadcast.
Listen to music,
yeah. Finally, for the we have Ask ZBrush 2. You guys have asked why Ask ZBrush is not on ZBrush Central. We have it on our YouTube channel, and we have a playlist set up for that. So there's currently 70 Ask ZBrush videos on the playlist here, and you can come to the site here, and you can grab and watch any of these videos. They're all short little videos that are answering various questions that we got through Twitter and support and things like that. So it's common things that people run across, and we've just answered them in a video format to kind of help you guys out. So if you have any questions related to that, use the Ask ZBrush stuff. Just go to Twitter and just use the hashtag AskZBrush. We'll put it in our system of all our questions and get those videos out. The Sculpt Off, you cannot watch it live in person, so it'll be streamed, but not live. It's usually in a classroom setting, so there's not a lot of places to stand and watch, but we do stream it. Anything else?
No, that
Paul?
was great. I like to listen to stylings of Joseph Drust when I sculpt. I have little, things I record through my day.
You just hear my playback over and over again? Yeah.
Hit list of
Remixes.
Joseph Drust sound effects and the hit list of Joseph Drust, I don't know, memes, you wouldn't say?
Yeah, and a lot of it's just really bad 80s music that I've made up my own lyrics to.
Well, you can't go wrong with the 80s. I'm just saying. All right,
Paul.
Let me take control.
I'm going to give it away here to Paul, and we'll get into this array mesh.
All right, there we go. So everyone should see my screen, see David Schultz environment piece. Yes, everyone with me? All right.
Yes, I'm with you.
So welcome to another webinar. We're super excited to have these going. So today we're going to be focusing on array mesh, but I'm going to be sprinkling a lot of things within ZBrush using array to either make brushes or say something like this, an environment. So there are many examples that people do with array mesh. So this is just one example of what you can do with the array mesh. So I wanted to show some more images here as well. So you can see this is another David Schultz image. A lot of this right here is array mesh and be able to something like this. So we're going to have some fun with that. Even using an organic way. So this is a Jared Bong using this in an organic way. Here's another hard surface piece. And again, Z Modeler was used to make this, and then Michael arrayed this around. And then this is a great way to use it to accent. So Pieter use this to put these little areas up here, have nice little glass areas. Or Ryan Kingsley used it for an environment piece and the fact of just architectural, think of maybe different designs, things like that. So I'm going to use it to show, say, something like this, that I did this drag in. So I'm going to really show, hey, how do you do these scales? Showing you how to use array mesh to make an image, and then turning it into a tattoo, in essence, maybe that I want to use, or an illustration that I want to use on a character. Then I'm gonna dive in and look at doing something more like an environment piece, like we have here, which is this little cathedral piece that I put together. And then here's just a closer up image, and we're gonna take a look at how I did something like this, and specifically how I did that little piece right there, because it's a great way to change things up. And like that piece right there and that piece right there are all from only that one right there. So using array, I was able to change up these pieces. So enough with the images. So I want to start with something fairly simple but complicated on the same sense. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, obviously, for those that are using ZBrush, we do have symmetry mode. But if we're making, say, something like this, where you got this triangle shape, right, that we have here, and even if I go into symmetry mode, it's great. I can work on these two sides, but nothing can happen up here at the same time. So array mesh is definitely a great way to do this. So something else I wanted to touch on as I was looking to make this piece for an illustration, I wanted to do several different doors in here. And you can see that the door is kind of open because in my final illustration, I have the door open. So one thing I want to touch base on is the layering system real quick with this too. So I'm going to show you a couple different doors I was just messing around with and figuring out, hey, how is this door going to open? So you can see here I have several subtools with various doors here. So we'll just look at just this one door right now that's on. And if I go down to my layer, you can see I just use my layer to kind of open the doors. And you can see hey, that's actually looking pretty cool with both doors being there. So I just kept going through the doors and opening and closing them using the layer system. So my other door is still on. So let's turn that one off. I don't want that one on anymore. right? So now we can look at different types of doors going through here. So you can see as I kept going through, I kept just using the layer system in essence to open and close my doors. So it's a great way to visually look at something and have fun with it and mess around with it. So it was just me looking at just polygrouping. So if we just look at just this piece right here, right? I can just polygroup these off, right? So what I like to do is, because I have 3 distinct shapes here, to get a quick polygroup, I'm going in the tool polygroup option, and I'm just doing an auto group. So then obviously what ZBrush is doing is giving it 3 groups, and then I can turn on my layer, and then now I can move these wherever I want to go. So here's a little trick starting with this, because I use this a lot even when I'm doing the array stuff. I've switched to the move mode. I'm holding it in the control key, and when I tap, okay, you can see that everything gets masked off but the polygroup that I tapped on. And right now I'm in record mode for the layer, so I can say, hey, I want this shape to go this way, and then I want this one to go this way, and then I want this one to go the opposite direction, right? So now if I come out of record mode by clicking right to the right of it, this is now in a layer, and I can see how my doors are going to open and close. So this was helping me when I was building, again, back to this piece here, this little triangle piece. When I was building this, I started putting the doors in and figuring out how that whole thing would look together. So let's take a look at how I made this piece and how I'm using array mesh to do it. Okay, so I've saved myself a project in here that I always tend to start with, which is a 6-sided cube. I like to start with this. It's just something very simple, clean, easy to use, all right? So I want to make that little bottom light part that I had in the triangle piece. So I'm going to start with just maybe changing the shape of this a little bit. I'm going to use the transpose line again to do this. All right, so I'm in move mode, which again, if I scroll over any of the buttons or any of the sliders within ZBrush, you'll see the shortcut. So it's W. So I'm just going to give this stuff because we do have some new people or people that have never used ZBrush in the webinar. So I have this here. I'm going to hit that little white circle, right? And what that does is it centers the transpose line. So the thing I want to understand, because I know this came up in the last webinar, I want everyone to understand about this. Right now I have symmetry mode on. So what this is actually centering in is the center of the cube, right? But symmetrically centering. So it's really actually centering upon this one side of the face because I have 2 access points here. So if I turn off symmetry and just hit the white circle, now that is sitting directly center of my cube, right? So again, that is a very important to understand when you guys are going to use that white circle. When symmetry is on, so you say you have 2, when I hit that white circle, it's centering both transpose lines symmetrically. So it's very important to understand because I do use this a lot. I'm turning symmetry on and off, and you're going to see me do this probably throughout this webinar. So I just want to touch base on that so you guys know what's going on and what I'm clicking as we move along here. All right, I'm going to turn perspective off because I'm doing hard surface, and I tend to always have my perspective off when I'm doing hard surface in ZBrush, just because there's certain tools that are camera dependent, and I don't want a camera or a fish look eye lens distortion to affect what I'm doing. All right, we'll turn my floor on, okay, just so I can get in here and take a look at my access points here. Here, I'm going to make this a little bit brighter for all of you so you can see online. So you can see right here, there's a red line and a blue line. So I'm turning that on just so I can gauge where my world access points are. So obviously, red is your X, blue is your Z, and then there's the green inside the cube right now, which is your Y. So I'm looking straight ahead now here. All right, I'll turn the floor off now, and I'm just going to change the shape of the move and say I want it to be a little bit more of a rectangle, I guess, maybe something more like that. And I don't want it to be as thick, so I'm just turning to the other side, right? And then there you go. So one thing else I want to touch on is because we have new people here, and I'm always trying to convert people to the navigation that I prefer. There's actually a couple navigations in ZBrush. I prefer the right-click navigation, which is I'm just holding I'm using a Cintiq, so I'm holding the right-click button that allows me to rotate. Okay, and I'm holding Control and right-click allows me to zoom, and then I'm holding Alt, and then the right-click allows me to move. So I prefer this just because when I'm up really close into something, say like this, you can see I can continually move around, I can rotate. So I just prefer that. So as I'm working here, you'll probably see me doing that a lot. Okay, so we got a general shape here, okay? So let's start array meshing this. So what I like to do at this stage when I did that piece is I immediately turned on array mesh, okay? So it'll look like nothing's happening, but we do have right here, there's a repeat option. And what that's doing is saying how many of these rectangles do I want? So I clearly want 3, right? So I'm just gonna tap on the slider so I can adjust like this, right? And once I let go, you see that little red box? That's allowing me now to type a value. So I'm just hitting the 3 key and hitting enter. So I've got 3. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to move this in the world. Here, I'm going to turn on the floor so you guys can see what's happening here as I move this. And so what I want to do, though, is I want to lock the size of this. I don't want the size of this to change, and I kind of want to lock the position. Okay, and then there's a reason why I'm doing those 2 buttons, because then when I move, right, I want to move this down. So we can see where these 3 pieces are. I'm going to want them to rotate, in essence, in this fashion here, right? So again, this is why I've turned the floor grid on in the beginning. I can see I was set up along the Z, so I want to rotate around that Z axis point, okay? So down here at the bottom in our array mesh, we have an offset, scale, rotate, and pivot. Okay, so we can just click on rotate, and now we have our rotate options. I want to go along the Z, right? And you can see as I start turning, you can see those other 2 pieces now popping. Because before I've had nothing going on. There's been no rotation, there's no offset, there's no scale change or anything different. So now that I'm having an offset of rotations along the Z, you can see those 3 pieces. And of course now, if I go to this repeat, you can see I can start really upping them. Okay, so I clearly want this to go around 360 degrees. Okay, let's put this back to 3. All right, and now you're going to see the point where I turned on this lock position and lock start, because what I'm going to do now is being in the move mode with my transpose line. Okay, and for those that don't know, when I'm holding and clicking out, anytime that the transpose line circle is sitting here on the document space, you can see that these handles, which is the world axis points, snap to the world axis points. So notice that as I start, say, clicking, see how they kind of move as I'm moving along the surface? Because the transpose line snaps the vertex points. So right now there's only, like, I can snap to these 4 points up here on the top, or this point down here, of course, right? Which I use, and you're going to see how I use this. So but the minute I go out into the open document, you can see that it automatically snaps. So now I can, click my transpose line into the circle. Here's another little fun fact for you guys. Another little fun tip, because I'm often zoomed in. So when I start dragging, you can actually just tap the shift key as well. And you can see that even though this didn't get out to the open document space, I was still able to snap these to the world axis. This is becoming important because I want to snap to the Y world. And now all I want to do is being in move mode again. I just want to pull down, and then there you can start seeing my triangle piece coming alive right in front of us here. So you can see, oh, that's looking good.
The flux capacitor.
Every time I do this, it's immediately in my head is Back to the Future flux. Alan Silvestri, definitely. Except I didn't fall down in my bathroom to get this though. So here's the beauty now of the array mesh. Okay. I kind of don't like the size of this. It's kind of, maybe I want to make it a little bit skinnier, and I think it's a little too tall. So again, I hit that white circle to center me in that world. It's already snapped to the world, and I'm just going to make it skinnier, right? So as I do one, it's doing it to the other 2 for me. So this becomes a really nice way for me to visually see what's happening to my piece as I go. So now I'm not going to even stop there. I want to be able to now start having some fun with this. Okay, so I'm going to say, you know what? Let's switch to our Z modeler. Okay, and along this face right here, I'm going to say inset. Let's say, because maybe I want to put a little light in there. Okay. So again, I'm holding the space bar. I'm hovering over the face here, which you can see by the red line and the red lines going around the face. Holding the space bar and hitting inset. And then I'm going to pull that in. That looks good right there. It looks like nothing's happening there, but when we switch to, say, Q mesh and push in, you can see it's also happening now on that other side. And then maybe I want to say, you know what? I want to insert maybe a single edge, and we'll put an edge there. And I'm actually going to bevel this now. And so you can see you got the nice bevel happening everywhere. You know, and it maybe, you know what? I feel like maybe multiple edge loops need to be used here. So I'm again inserting multiple edge loops. And I'm just clicking and see I can change things on the fly here. So I'm going to think, yeah, you know, maybe I want to have this piece here. Okay, and I'm temporarily painting again by holding the Alt key. And then now that it's just one, I can pull up and you can see it's happening in all three pieces. So clearly what I was doing is I wanted to make this into some kind of little light. So I did multiple insets here. So I did like an inset like there, and then I Q meshed this up and we pulled up, and then there I started building my little light. And then of course I wanted to see what this looked like smooth. So I'm turning on dynamic now, which is hitting that D key, D for David, Dynamesh, or Dynamite. Okay, so Dynamite. We're probably getting too old, and some people might not even know that show. So again, that's found in the tool. So I have the tool palette docked here the entire time. Okay, for those that aren't using ZBrush yet or new to it. So I'm opening up geometry. Okay, and you can see right here there's a dynamic, and I'll close everything down but that so you can see what that looks like. And I'm just hitting the D key to turn it on. Okay, and then Shift D turns it off. So I want to control the smoothness here. So I want to say how many times to divide in preview. So you see the higher I put that, you can see up here how smooth it gets. If I drop it down, you can see it's not as smooth. So what dynamic is done. I wanted to say dynamite subdivs. Dynamic subdivs is doing is showing you a preview that if I actually did subdivide this 3 times. So the next thing I want to do is throw a little crease on here. All right, I'm going to do a crease all. So now I'm just looking at the exact same thing that before I even did the dynamic subdiv. But what I love to play, and I always use this slider whenever I'm going to do something hard surface within ZBrush and using it, you're going to see me constantly using this, is I like to change this little crease level slider here as well. So I'm going to drop it to say something like 2. Okay, and it'll look like nothing's happening. We need to update our dynamic subdiv. So I either can turn it on and then off, and you can see then what that happens there, right? Or even if I turn this up another smooth subdiv, it'll update. So I kind of don't like it only having 2, so I'm going to change it to 3. I'm going to turn it off and turn on, and then there you go. That's what I'm looking. So now I get some nice soft corners happening in here. So that's what I'm looking for. Okay, so this becomes a really nice workflow, allowing me to start manipulating and playing and seeing what it's looking like there. Okay, so what this crease level is doing is telling ZBrush how many levels does the creasing stay. So if you remember, I hit crease all, so every single edge here, right, has a crease. All right, so I'm telling ZBrush, even though you have this crease, you can only keep it for 3 subdivisions. And right now in our dynamic, you can see I have it set to 4. So on the 4th subdivision, ZBrush is actually going to smooth and ignore the creasing. So that's why it rounds a little bit. Okay, so this is kind of where I started, but we need to turn it into that triangle piece. So here's a fun thing that I like to do with array mesh. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm done with, say, this part, this light portion, and I kind of want to get even a little more crazy. Of course, we can continue, say, all right, let's work in symmetry, right? We'll go to Q mesh, along a face, and I can pull out, and you can see it happening up there, and I can pull things along here, and you can see how we can start getting that shape. I know I want to start doing more things along here, though. So what I actually did is I turned my array mesh at this point into actual geometry. So instead of this being an instance, because that's what array mesh is doing, right now we only have this face or this piece here, and it's being arrayed twice here. You can see my polygon count is sitting at 24. And what I'm going to do is come down here at the bottom of array mesh. I'm going to click this make mesh. I'm going to turn the extrude off though, because I don't want anything to extrude. And I'm going to just click make mesh. And now you can see my polygon count just tripled, right, to 72. And now you can see the poly frame of all 3 items. The reason why I'm doing this is now what I want to do is I want to use our handy dandy ZBrush brush again. I'm going to hover over the face. I'm going to hold space bar. And I'm going to say bridge. And I'm going to say bridge 2 polys. Okay. So then I'm going to say go from this poly to that poly. Right? And then I'm going to say I want to go now this poly to that poly. And then now when I smooth, you can see what I'm getting here. So I need creasing along the edges here. So I'm going to hover over an edge, go to my crease. I'm going to say, hey, I want a complete edge loop. All right, creasing to happen. So then as I do this, you can see this is now getting harsh again. And now if I want it on the bottom, of course, I can go down here to the bottom. And then maybe I want it on that edge as well. So now I have that triangle piece starting to happen. I'm not done though. I want to now say, hey, I kind of want to play inside here, right? So we're back to this thing again with symmetry, right? If I say, went back to say our little handy dandy inset and I inset here, right? It's insetting here, but not up here. So here's what I did. I wanted to split these in half. So here's a nice little trick that I like to use the ZBrush brush for. Again, I'm holding the space bar. I'm over an edge, and I know that because the edge is highlighted white. So I'm holding the space bar, switching to insert, and I'm going to actually click on multiple edge loops. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is change the interactive resolution here, and I'm going to change it to a specific resolution. So what that does is says 8. So when I click, I get 8 spans across here, automatic. Okay? So what I want to do is actually change this to 1. Okay, so I'm just, again, holding this. I'm over an edge, holding the space bar. I've got insert, multiple edge loops, and I'm just hovering over here, and you can see I'm still, my thumb is still on the space bar, and I'm changing it to 1. And now when I tap, that's dead center of these faces here. So this becomes a huge advantage for me. Okay? So number 1, every time now I know I click, I'm getting the center point here. Okay? Notice one thing here that happened when I did this last kick. You see how this is on an angle? Because it's trying to match between these two, right? So this edge is facing this direction, right? And this edge is facing this direction. So that's kind of giving the halfway point, right? So let's switch to say something about selecting a single edge. All right. And so you guys can see this. I'm going to come out of my dynamic. And what I'm going to do is just click. And you can see as I move up and down, you can see that this line, it's trying to match whatever it's getting closer to. Right. So the beautiful thing here is if you hold the shift key, okay, you can match now, say perfectly straight. So that is parallel now with this. And how this works, whatever edge along this edge right here, wherever I start, okay, and click, and then hold the shift key, that's the one it's going to try and match, is to the closest edge. So this edge right here is my closer edge when I click here. This edge is closer when I click here. So imagine cutting this in half again. If I'm on the halfway point on this side, and I hold the shift key, it's going to give me a nice straight parallel edge like that. If I'm more further down this edge and I'm clicking here and holding the shift key, it's going to try and be more parallel with this edge. So knowing this, I want to take advantage of this. Okay. So what I want is a nice straight edge along here that's perfectly parallel with that right there. Right. So if I click here, hold the shift key, I can go boom, there I go. And now I can start blessing with this. But now we've got the problem again, is I'm getting it on these both sides, but nothing's happening up here. So this is why I like using this array mesh, because this is a shape that would have been a lot more difficult for me to do in the past, but array mesh is making it a lot easier for me, and then I can change things. So what I'm going to do now is let's delete this top half, and let's just keep this bottom half. So I'm just selecting out this up here. I'm holding down the Control and Shift key and dragging out. And my fingers aren't on the keyboard anymore, by the way. And now I'm holding the Alt key to switch it to the red box, and that hides whatever in the red box. And then now what I want to do is delete the hidden. So that's found in the tool Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So now all I have is this piece. Okay. I'm going to go down the bottom of the tool palette just so you guys can see. And I'm going to open up my display properties. I'm going to turn this double on so that we can see every single face. Because by default, double is off so that ZBrush only renders the faces that are facing the camera. In most cases, you don't want to see the back of the sculpt. Doesn't need to be rendered.
Hey, Paul,
absolutely.
Can I get you with
I was waiting for this.
Can you do a bridge 2 points with the ZModeler brush?
You wanna bridge 2 points? Correct. Yeah, you want to go from one point to another point is what they're asking?
Yes. And then if you want to do a split edge in there too. Throwing you off course.
So when you're on an edge, right, obviously if you're clicking on any of the edge, okay, you have the split option here. Okay, and that allows you to split and you can start doing things like this. So what that's doing is looking at that edge, and you see it's creating the triangles here. So if I say click on this one, so I'm just creating those two triangles across there. Okay. And you asked for what? What was the other one?
The bridge 2 points.
So you want to bridge 2 points. So we have the bridging capability here. Yep. Okay, along a point where we can turn it into a ring or we can switch to 2 points. So again, doing a ring is something a little different. So if I now click on a point and do a ring, right, it's just trying to ring around that point. But if I want to now bridge across 2 points, okay, I can do the bridging of 2 points across here. So let me get a better example so that we can go to it.
No, that was pretty good. Can you do the slice one too, just really quick, on how you can just create topology with slice? Like you just use the slice brush and cut a
absolutely.
A new loop
so
through there.
The thing about the slice brush, though, when you guys start using this, when you're holding down the Control and Shift key, okay, that's how we get to these other brushes up here. So I'm holding down the Control Shift, and this is where you get your selection brushes, clipping brushes, and then here's the slice curve. Okay, so let's say maybe I want to put an angle like this. You can see what happens. It's not symmetrical. Right, so it's not happening on the other side for us. Okay, so this goes back again. I'm going to throw the floor grid on again. You can see that red line. That's the positive side of X over here, is the positive side. So there's no line here, so this is negative side of X. This becomes important because what I can do is say, hey, I want to slice across here and maybe put a little bit of an angle like that. For some reason here. And then what the slice brush is doing is automatic adding an edge loop. And it's also giving a new polygroup. So this becomes very handy. Okay. Here's a nice little trick for you guys. If I want to slice, but I don't want to change the polygrouping, you guys could actually mask off the whole surface or the part that you're slicing, which I'm just masking off by holding down the Control key and then tapping on the document. And then now if I slice, it'll still slice, but you see it didn't change the polygroup. So if I clear my mask, that polygroup never changed. Right, so here, we'll do it down here so you can really see, because when I come across multiple polygroups, you can see all the polygroups that are changing. Right? So if I just do this, where I've masked off again and I come straight across, you can see none of the polygroups actually changed. So that becomes pretty important to know. And then the other thing that becomes a fun thing to do with the slice brush, if you start with inside a polygroup, okay? So if I come in here and I start inside here with the slice inside the green, you can see that the green never changed. See that green stayed the same? But then because I sliced this way, I got a polygroup here and a polygroup here. Right? Again, let me do that again so you guys can see that. So here, I'll start in the purple one. So I'm holding down Control Shift. I'm just clicking in there, and you can see where the start of that line is, right? And I'm going to double tap the Alt key and make it harsh. And then there you go. So you can see there's a new polygroup here, right? And then this is slicing across here, but because this started here, this polygroup does not change, okay? But this green ones do. So it's a great way to use the slice brush to do that, right? So what the point of this was, when I slice across here, right, I can now go into my tool, geometry again, and in the modify topology, there's a mirror and weld. And so I want to mirror and weld along the X. So when I click that, you can see I get both sides. There you go. And I know what's being mirror and welded because of this line, right? If this slice was on this side and I do a mirror and weld, you can see that that disappears. Because what the ZBrush is doing is actually deleting the negative X side, right? Taking the positive X side, flipping it, mirroring it, and then welding it. So you may have noticed also when I do this, this is a great way to get a center point right here of this piece as well. It's another great way besides just using that brush that I showed you. Okay, so let me show you the last thing with this, and then we're going to move on to the dragon. So I'm going to actually cap this. Okay, so I'm going to cap the edges, right? So it's closed off. I definitely want this to be creased here, right? So that when I smooth, I get something like that, right? And then now what I want to do, let's just go back to our array mesh, and I'm going to say, again, 3, right? I'm rotating around the Z, right? So 360, and then there you go. And now I'm back to my shape, but the beauty is now I've got now this portion, okay? And now I can start doing a lot of other crazy things here, right? I can say, you know what, now let's add an insert edge here, and let's maybe do something like this, and let's insert an edge through here, right? And then now maybe what I want to do is paint temporary polygroups. So again, I'll turn this off so you guys can see here. And in this edge, I want to Q mesh this out, and I can see it happening now everywhere. So this is how I started making that shape that you guys originally saw. And now I can start playing with this and maybe add an edge loop here, add an edge loop here, add an edge loop there, and then I'll delete that, and I got a nice little bevel there. And maybe I want to put a smaller type of bevel here. So I'm using this edge loop to do the beveling here instead of just switching to, say, the bevel option. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Because if I do this bevel, see, it creates this. It's trying to continue and bevel along this way. I don't want that. I just want a nice little bevel along this edge. And because, again, if we turn array mesh off, I've got this all capped off, ready to go. I'm going to use the insert instead and say, right about there. And I know if I delete now this edge by holding the Alt key, boom, there's a nice bevel happening. And then, of course, if I now show my array mesh, that's happening everywhere, which is really nice. And now maybe, I don't know, maybe we want to insert multiple edges here, and I definitely want an interactive resolution, and then maybe start doing this. We'll change that, and then say, hey, you know what? I want to take this particular polygroup, so I'm going to go to polygroup all with my Q mesh, and maybe I want to pull them out and pull them in maybe. And this is the beauty now of my array mesh. I'm seeing it happen everywhere. So when I pull back, I can see, is that really what I'm looking for? Or am I looking more for something like that? So you can see really how actually complex you can start to get here using this, right? So I can say, hey, that, and then I'm going to say just one, and I'm going to pull that up, and I see it now happening there. And maybe I want to do that, and that bridges along there. So now we're getting a lot deeper as far as what we're making here. Oh, I want this to come across, so maybe like this. We'll make this come up, and now my artistic flows are starting to take over now. So there you go. And there you have it. There's the little shape that was kind of something that would have been a little more difficult for me to do in the past. Okay. And then the last thing I want to show and want you to understand is here, I'll polygroup this off by hitting Control W, so it's just one polygroup. I'm going to turn the array mesh off. And what I'm going to do is this these faces right here, I want to make them one polygroup. Okay, so I'm going to say flat island. Okay, and when I click on this, you can see it automatically changes that to 1. So if I hold the Alt key again, every time you tap the Alt key, we can change the polygroup. So what I'm doing is I'm setting this up and this up as the same polygroup. And when I turn array mesh on, I know it's happening also on the array meshes. So when I go to make mesh, this is where I actually turn the extrude and close option on. And when I hit make mesh, ZBrush is welding those points there. So then it's all one piece. Okay, so I want to move on to the dragon now. So let me load that guy up. All right. So address why I'm loading that up if there's a question that I can answer that doesn't take me having to go inside of ZBrush.
We're good right now. We hit the one.
Is there any excitement at all out there? Okay.
Oh, there's excitement.
As long as I'm bringing joy to the world. The ZBrush world.
There's woohoos now,
All
and
right.
oh yeah.
So, you guys should now see my dragon here. So, I want to touch base on how I use the array mesh to create these scales, okay? Because this is a unique way to make some really nice looking scales. And then when we're done, I'm going to show you how I can turn this with using ZBrush as my render into like an illustration, which then I turned into like a tattoo for a character. Okay, so let me load my handy dandy scale that I've made. Okay, so I've got my scale here. So this is all I made, nothing fancy. Again, I'll turn on polyframe so you can see what's happening here. You can clearly see I use ZModeler to do this. When I smooth, you can see what we get, right, as a scale. Right? So what I want to start doing is, again, looking at the floor. Let's see what axis I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the Z, right? That's what we're looking at. This is the Z way, which is great. That's what I want. Y is up. So this makes complete sense to me. Perfect. All right. What I might want to do is also in deformation, if I hit unify, you can see that actually resizes and puts the mesh at dead center of the world. And because I'm using this to turn it into a brush, that's actually what I want. So the unify will change the physical scale of the model and put the model right dead center at the world. Now, if you don't want to change the scale of the model and you just want to move it to the world, okay, in the tool geometry, and let's close these up so it's just not crazy here for you guys. There is actually a positions here, right? And you see there's X, Y, Z, so I can move these to 0 if I want and put that at the 0 world. And then there you have it. Okay, so you can do this and it won't change the physical size, right? Where deformation, unify, puts it at the center world, but also changes the size. Okay, so again, we're still in the tool palette here. I'm not leaving the tool palette. In fact, I don't think I leave the tool palette until now when we make it into a brush. So we got this. This is looking great. Perfect. All right, let's start arraying meshing this. So I'm going to turn on my array mesh. Okay. I'm going to lock the positions and the size because I don't want the shape of this scale to change as I start messing around with this. Okay. And so what I want to do is I probably want to repeat it. I don't know. Let's just guess here, maybe 12. Let's shoot for 12. Let's see what that's going to look like. And what I want to do now is rotate around the Y, right? So I'm going to go to rotate. Okay. And I'm going to click here. And I'm going to say 360. And you can see what that's doing. Now, something else that you guys can do, what I'm about to show you, is right now, as I've been using the transpose line like we did in the previous one, where I'm just switching to move now, right? And looking from above, I can now do something like this or do something like that. And I can see my shape that's happening here. Okay? But what I can do also, what I want you guys to be aware of, and which we will start using here, is you can turn on this transpose option. And what that does now is makes the transpose line itself the controller for the array mesh stuff. So you can see here there's a repaint, there's a stage, okay? And so if I say switch to rotate, all right, and now I can use this transpose line, in essence, to rotate my pieces. So you can see how that's rotating now, right? Or if I want to rotate this way and make some kind of, it's an animation. Okay. So when you have this transpose option on, the transpose line doesn't work the same as now if I pull down, see, you're just creating some nice little scale spiral thing happening. Because now what this is actually doing, because I'm in move mode, it's actually offsetting now. All right, so I want to make it clear that everyone understands this. When I have the transpose option on here in the array mesh, it's now controlling, instead of using the transpose line to control the individual piece, which this is our individual piece, it's actually now being used to control all the options in array mesh. So move deals with offset. So if I start, say, going in this direction, you can see I can start offsetting in any direction that I want, right? And then your scale is also going to relate to this scale. So now if I'm scaling along this, you can see it scales along the actual now array that's happening. Okay, and you can see I'm doing uniformly scale. And then you have your graphs to make some really crazy here. I want it wider there, and then skinnier down here, wider in the middle, and skinnier at the tip again. And then maybe I want to start playing with this. So you can see heartbeat, right? So you can do some really cool stuff, okay? So you got to be aware of that that's the difference when you turn on that transpose line option compared to it off. So with it off, see, nothing's happening. So here, if we go back to undo, if I wanted to, right, when we were originally at this stage here, right, and I started saying the repeats I wanted, I could even turn on the transpose line here and say how many repeats I want, right? So you can see as I just click and drag back and forth, it's changing my repeats just like it's changing the repeats here. All right? So what I want to do, again, is I'm going to keep it off. I'm going to say 12 was great. It's a good number. And I already know I want to rotate along the Y 360 degrees. So I'm just typing in my numbers. And then with the transpose option off, I know that when I switch to move, it's actually moving the piece itself. So the benefit and the advantage of this is now if you notice when I turn transpose line on now, you can see that pivot point is actually sitting dead center of the whole array. That's really important to understand, okay? Compared to if we undo this and I turn on transpose now and I array this out, see the difference there? See what's happening? So what I would need to do is actually move the pivot point. So in here, I'd have a pivot option. But what you can do is there's a yellow circle there in the middle. And if I click, you can see I can do pretty much the same thing, right? That I did before. And see now that's sitting at the center. But for me, I want to make sure that, hey, that center is actually sitting at the world center. And right now it's not sitting at the world center. I've moved it off the world center. So seeing the Z, I've come forward 4.5, and I don't need to come up. So I actually want my pivot point to stay at the world center. So what I did, knowing how this works, I turned this off, right? And then just moved the piece forward in the world. Instead of moving my pivot forward, I moved my piece forward. And then when I turn the transpose, you can see that pivot point stays there. Okay, because this is important for the next step. Because obviously, I'm looking at a smooth version here, right? What I want to do now is make another array. So right now, all we're arraying is this one scale going all the way around, okay? And then I'm going to say, hey, let's append a new, okay? Or you can hit insert. Now you can see my transform stage says 2. You can see because I have the transpose option on, I have a repeat of 2 and stage 2. So currently, I'm on stage 2. So what I do want to do is I want to offset that second stage in the world. So I do want to have the transpose line on. I want to have my move on. And I'm just going to move it up. That looks great. And then I want to actually rotate from the top view. So again, you can see that handy dandy snapping of my transpose line coming in handy here. All right. So I'm going to switch to rotate up here. And now I'm just going to rotate and say, how offset do I want those? There you go. All right. Now there's a couple things here. Again, let's take a note what array mesh is doing here. I'm taking one mesh and I'm arraying it now. I've arrayed it radially, and now I've told that, hey, take that whole first stage, which again, if I go back to that first stage, the first stage is that first row, and now that second stage is taking that bottom stage and repeating it above, right? So if I just started repeating this, see, you just keep getting those, right? I only want this, okay? My polygon count isn't changed. So what's great here, again, about the array mesh, here, I need to be transpose line off option here. I'm going to click that center circle, and I know I want dead center. And I'm going to say, you know what? It's not wide enough, so let me make it a little bit wider, right? So I'm going to switch to move. Here, I'm going to turn the floor off just so we get a consistent, nice look here. And now I can stretch these out. I can turn on dynamic and see how that looks and see when those are touching. And then that's the overlap I'm looking for. I can, if I even want to, say, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to put a little bit of a rotation in there, right? So I'm going to turn to the side and say, hey, I'm going to switch to rotate, and I want to have a little rotation in my scales, so they're maybe sitting more like that. And then there you go. So now I've got a nice start to these scales, okay? So I'm going to turn dynamic off, and now I'm going to turn this into a brush. But in order to turn this into a brush, we need to turn all this into a piece of geometry. Now, I only have 2 stages right now, right? There's only 2 stages happening here. But there'll be times if you start using array mesh, you might have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 stages, okay? So instead of me sitting here always going here to this next stage and hitting make mesh, and then go to the next stage, make mesh, go to the next stage, make mesh. Another way I can turn my array mesh into a piece of geometry where I want all the arrays at once is in the geometry section, okay? So I'm going to open the geometry. And for those that don't know, I'm holding the shift key when I click on another subpalette. That's what we call these little guys right here, all these. So it keeps my array open. So see if I hold the shift key and click, right? Geometry closes. If I just click geometry, see how our array mesh automatically closes? If you're like me, hey, I know I'm going to go back and forth between those two. I'm going to hold the shift key and tap, and then both stay open for me. But what I'm going to do is hit this convert BPR to geo, and bada bing, bada boom. That was an important moment right there. Right? So instead of me sitting here down here in the array and hitting make mesh, make mesh, make mesh, make mesh, especially when you start having arrays with like in that cathedral I did, I had some of the arrays, I had like 4 or 5. And when I wanted to convert it into actual geometry, I didn't want to have to sit there and keep hitting make mesh, make mesh, make mesh, make mesh. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind, everybody, again, with this, okay? If I turn dynamic on and I convert to geo, right? It converts the dynamic version, right? So you're looking at the dynamic version now. I don't want that because I want to turn this in the mesh. Look how high my polygon count is. It's almost 500,000 polygons. That's not what I want. I want to keep it really low because I want to turn this into a mesh, into which I can use on a brush. All right, so I'm coming out of dynamic subdiv mode, and I'm just hitting the convert BPR to geo. Now I have this. So now when I hit, see there's only 2,000, and I hit smooth, it's still nice and smooth, okay? So the next thing I want to do now is turn this into a brush. So how I'm looking at it is perfect. When I draw out my dragon like this, that's how the scales I want them to go. So I'm looking at my scales, all right? I'm going to hit the B key. I'm going to hit create an insert mesh brush. So I'm going to tap that. I'm going to say, no, this is a whole new brush. I'm going to say new, right? And then now when I pull this up, you can see I'm just inserting now these scales. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell ZBrush I actually want this to go along a plane or a curve, okay? So in the stroke menu, we have our curve options, and we're going to turn on curve mode, okay? Then I'm also going to say, hey, all right, let's see now what we have here. Oh, now we're starting to get somewhere, right? We're starting to get where I was a little bit with that dragon. You can see a couple issues here when we get in close. The gap's not right, okay? As it's turning here, the scales aren't really moving right with what I want, Okay, so there's some options here that we can play with to fix that. So to fix this gap is in the stroke, because it's the stroke gap that's the problem. Okay, so I'm going to say, hey, I want that curve stepping to maybe here. Let's try 0.7. And then I'm going to tap on the curve, right? And then boom, you can see that all updates now. And that's actually pretty good. Let's look at what that looks like at a smooth state. That's getting there. Let's go maybe a little bit lower for this particular one. Maybe let's try a 0.6. Let's give it a little bit more of an overlap. There, that's what I'm looking for. So now as I move this, you can see what we're starting to get. Now the next thing I want to maybe fix is the way that this is bending, right? So you can see there's a slight bend there, which is nice. But if you want to have a little bit more of a bend, so the scales aren't, see how they're pointing out right here on the bend? In the brush palette, we have our modifiers, okay? And then what I want to do is I want to change the curve resolution, right? And that's going to, in essence, think about it almost like subdividing the curve, let's say. Okay, so let's up this curve res. All right. So, oops, I was hitting the wrong button. So I'm going to say maybe 3. Okay, and then when I'm going to turn off dynamic and touch it, you can see now the scales are starting to lay more flat there. Right? So then now I'm like, perfect. I've got my brush for the base of my dragon's body and the arms. So then there you go. So then all I need to do now is draw out a dragon. So the beauty here is I just grabbed a plane. I know it's a real brain buster here for us all. I turn this into a make poly mesh, right? So I have something like this. Okay. And then I said, all right, let's just draw now out. Let's see what we get here. I'm going to say I want the dragon's body to be maybe like this. And then there you go. Right? And because this is already polygrouped off, right? I can now just look at the dragon if I want. Okay. And now you can see all the scales. Here's the advantage of the right-click navigation. You can see as I move in, wherever I have my cursor and I'm zooming into, it zooms into there. Really nice feature. I want to change the size of the scales. So all I do is anywhere in the open document where I have the red brush size, I just change my draw size. And if I tap now on the curve, and you can see that the brush is turned to an aquamarine color, I can tap and see now they get bigger. Right? So you can see this is pretty much how I made my dragon body. This is how how I did it. And this is how I did the arms too. I just made this a brush. I took it one step further though and made another tool. So I made the middle part. So here's your body tool. So you can see what I did here. I had, if I open up my subtools here, see I have one subtool, which is this piece. And then I array meshed around the scales there and then array meshed the scales around there to get my offset. And then I merged them down, right, to make now the final piece, which is this. And the key thing here for me was, if you notice, this body piece, which is that middle piece, was facing straight forward. I don't want that when I draw out on the plane. I actually want it to be kind of on the side. So I actually rotated this piece so that the centerpiece isn't facing straight forward. So that, again, when I make the brush here, if I say, okay, brush, create an insert mesh, I'm going to say append it to the existing one. So I'm going to say append. Okay, and it's saying, hey, hit the M key now. If I hit the M key, I have both variations here now. Right, so there's body and there's scales. So now that I have this, right, and I draw on this out, this is what I get.
Hey, Paul, can you adjust the taper on that or the scale?
Oh,
to
boy.
get at the taper? You're probably going to do that already,
man, that's exactly where I was going. You guys are good out there. You're on top of me. I like it. All right, so that's exactly what I did for the body. This is great. Thanks for whoever emailed me and said, hey, Paul, when do you want me to bring that up? Good timing, good timing. It didn't really happen, but we're going to go with it. So as I draw this out now, right, I'm getting this, right? And now you can see that inner body and see it's kind of facing a little bit further to the plane, and this is what I was doing. So again, we need to change our stepping. So let's, start maybe at 0.8. That perfect. money. Okay, you can see the gap right there is not working very well in our favor. So that gap is being controlled again by our curve resolution here, right? So I can say, here, let's try 3, and then just tap on the curve, bada bing, bada boom, right? And then now someone's brought up, hey, I want to taper this, right? And this is exactly what I did for my body. And you can see we can continually move these around, change it up, right? I can move this around, do whatever I want with this, even after it's drawn out. Okay, and now I want the tapering. That was easy. In the stroke menu, okay, there's curve modifiers. Again, I'm holding the shift key so I can open up this while this is still open. And I'm clicking on the size option. And what that option is doing is using this graph right below it to say what is the taper. So now when I click on this, you can see the taper's in the wrong direction. Okay, this is the head of the dragon. This is the tail of the dragon, right? So I'm going to go to stroke. And in this graph, I'm going to say flip here, flip vertically, right? So that's what this FV, and you can see as I hover over it, it says flip vertically. And this is obviously flip horizontal. Okay, so now when I tap, you can see I'm getting that taper. And then it's just a little crazy for me, the taper, a little too much. So I'm going to say, hey, I don't want it to taper as much. So see, it's not tapering as much. So I got to find that nice setting that I want. And then instead of having it start immediately, just taper, 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 taper. I don't know why I just said that 14 times, but so what's happening is when it starts at the curve and ends at the curve, the taper's immediately starting and working its way. Maybe I don't want that to start until it's way further down the body, right? So that's where I can use this graph to help me out. So I can click and make another point, right? And let's say if I pull off and pull back in, it becomes a sharp point. So I can do something like this. And then when I tap, you can see now the taper is not really happening until about here in the body. That's exactly how I did the body of the dragon. So before I move on to that render and then we move on to the cathedral, because I'm going to open a new project. Is there anything else question-wise for this dress before I open that project? Because we're going to lose what I'm working on right now.
The taper was the one.
All right,
so
good to go.
Got that one.
All right.
People want to know if you have a blog or a website.
Man. No. Yeah, I'm one of those artists. You know, I when I'm talking to you guys as a community, I'm always like, why are you not posting your work? Like, on ZBrush Central and arts. I know so many people have gotten jobs on ZBrush Central just posting there. So what I'm going to do is I have a ZBrush Central, and I'm going to post this stuff up there on my ZBrush Central thread, and I'm probably going to do some image breakdowns for you guys as well to go along with this webinar, so that you guys can also have an image breakdown and see the steps, because I tend to talk fast and work fast. So I'm working on it, but I'm just full of energy. Okay, so let me load my project here and really show how I took this to the next level as far as me wanting to turn it into an illustration and then eventually turn it into a tattoo for a character. All right? So we'll load up my project. So you can see here what I have. I've got my dragon. All right? Here, I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see my cropping that I'm just doing, right? So he is got a basic material that I customized here. So all I did is in the modifiers here for the materials, I just turn the ambient completely up, right? And see my diffuse and spec are off, right? And there's a reason for that because there's something in the filters I'm using to get that line art, okay? So we'll let this render out. So what we'll do is let's dock our render palette, okay? And we're going to go into these filters real quick, and then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. Hey, before we do that, actually, what I want to do is, you know, I made the background white just for the purpose of posting. Let's change the background to pure black. So I'm in Document. I'm going to say Back, and I'm going to drag to the black swatch, and now it's pure black, right? The floor is on. That's really important because I want a shadow to cast, right? So now I'm going to render this out. So this will take about, I think it takes on my system about 10 or 15 seconds. I'm rendering an ambient occlusion on it. I'm rendering shadows on it. And that's it. And then I have 2 lights, I believe. Oh, maybe only 1 light in this particular scene. Right? And what I'm doing is by turning up that ambient all the way in the base material, it's now a flat shape. But when my filters kick in, it's going to make it pop and make it look like an actual illustration or drawing that's popping up. So, and then my screen resolution, my document size is pretty big. I think I made it around like 4,000 pixels by 2,000 pixels. We can look once the rendering is done. And what I'm doing is I'm using this AA half option. And what that option does is it takes your document size, automatically cuts it in half, and puts on a nice anti-alias on your render. So it looks really nice to do that. So once it's done, I'll show you the difference between looking at the actual render and looking at the AA half, how different it can look. So it's just, we're almost there. We're almost finished up. So this is the time when we throw out a quiz question.
So you got about 30 minutes left, Paul.
Yep, we're going to show this, and then we're going to go into the parts of the cathedral. And then, again, fire away, though. Interrupt me for questions. Hopefully, I'm answering them as we go here. So having an AO and shadows does take some time for this to render. But I enjoy rendering and then playing with the filter system. It's a lot of fun to play with that filtering system with inside ZBrush, especially for what I'm using it for in this stage. And there you go. Boom, we're done. So you see, boom, it popped. So what's controlling this now are these. And what's great about these are real time. So once it's rendered, I don't have this. So if I turn things off, right over here, you can see what's going to happen, right? How much that shape or the mesh is going to change, right? So there's just the render with no filters at all. So it's got some slight shading, and I want that shading, right? I'm looking for that shading because give it a little bit of that shading and tattoo. So the first filter, I'm doing a colorized black, and I'm using edge detection. So that's what gives me that little bit line, almost look like line art. So I'm even breaking it down kind of like a tattoo artist would. And then I turn on another one, and now I'm using cavities now. And this is why I'm also using a basic material, is I want color value, in essence, that shade value, and I want cavity being detected, and I want edge detection being detected. So I'm going to turn on the third one here. So this filter is now giving me some color variation in here. And you can see I'm putting it in the shadows. Okay, it's harder to see with the pure black background. Then I'm going to turn on the fourth one here. Okay, and then now I'm adding another color. Okay, I'm adding some more black, and I'm putting it only in the background. And what this is doing, you can't see it right now. It's really hard to see. Here, if I change the color here, right, it's difficult to see with where we're at right here. It's detecting along the edges and putting it in the background. Then I'll put on the fifth filter, right? And then I'll put on that sixth filter. And I use this one as to bring a little bit more of an Orton. So it just brightens him up a little bit, right? So we'll turn this back to the dark color that I want. Okay. And then I don't think I had a 7 filter. Nope. So there you go. So now what I want to do is turn now this into a tattoo to use. So all I'm going to do is go to texture. Okay. And I'm going to say grab dock. There it is. And now you can see what I have. Right. And now what I want to do is turn this and use this on a mesh. So let me load just a simple body here. We got a torso loaded here. Okay. And we will divide that up. All right, well, here, let's delete. We don't need everything here. All right, so we'll divide this up so we can get some polygons here. We're going to need some polygons to sculpt on. Let's get crazy. Let's get to, what is that, like 20 million? There you go. And what I want to do is use this texture, okay, on him. So I'm going to switch to the standard brush. I'm going to say just, let's say mRGB. So let's also switch our material to say skin shade 4. I like to use that for painting. So this is what I have right now, right? We'll turn the floor off. So we're just looking at him. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my color, fill object. So he's all filled with this color. Oh, look, he's got even a little beige tone to him now. All right. And now I want to go now into the texture, and here's my dragons. Right? So I'm going to say, let's grab this one. I'm going to say have an anti-alias to it, and also have some transparency, and I'm going to add it. And you can see here what's happened is I've added it to spotlight. Okay? So now I can move this wherever I want. Now the key point here, see how everything, that background is not in the image. You guys see that? It's because I used pure black as my document background. So pure black in ZBrush world is seen, okay, as transparent when we're in Spotlight. So I knew I was going to go to Spotlight, and that is the reason why I turned my background from being white to being black. So that when I went in here, I turned on this option right here, is transparency texture. I turn on an anti-alias to make it smooth, and then I just hit that plus symbol. So now I can put this wherever I want to go, right? So I can say, where do we want that tattoo to be? On his belly? No. Let's go maybe this big, right? I'll hit the Z key, and let's put it on his back instead. All right, and maybe let's zoom up him, and let's position him to where we want that. Oops. There we go. Maybe there. It's a nice little spot right there. I'm going to tell it, hey, I just need to poly paint. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. And now I can paint, right, on this. So as I'm painting here, right, it might be like, well, what's happening? So here, let me turn on this and turn my opacity down, right, of this image. Okay, and you can see there's the image, right? And then there's the tattoo on the body. Okay, so that's a really cool way to use ZBrush to, in essence, create an image that I'm going to use for the tattoo. Okay, so we're running out of time. So I want to show that cathedral piece and what we can do with that. There's the fun little piece that we've got in there, because there's a fun array piece as well to use. So we're going to turn Spotlight off. Let me load my little cathedral buddy here. All right. So what I started with is actually this window. So what I want to do is how I made this piece and how I did this. Okay. So here's all I did to make these little circular pieces. We're going to start with the ZBrush cylinder. Okay. Again, I'm going to turn the floor on so you guys can see the axis points. I want to look along the Z because I want the cylinder top to look at me. Okay. So because this is a primitive or mathematical primitive, I can go down the initialized state. I can say a line along the Z. So now I know that cylinder's facing the Z axis. I'm going to say I want an inner radius. Okay, which is good. Let's go maybe a little bit skinnier. I don't need the spans this direction, right? So I'll turn those all the way down to 3. And I definitely don't need it to be this wide. So I'm going to say maybe something like that. So I'm going to keep it at the default 32. Again, that's controlling the spans this way. 32 is more than enough for what I'm about to do. But what's really important about this little technique I'm about to show you is you have a center line right here and right here. So if you start playing with this, you can see that's not perfectly sitting centered now right there. That becomes important for about this trick that I'm about to show you for with the array mesh we're going to do. Okay, so I'm keeping both of those. Perfect. I love it. It's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to click Make Poly Mesh. All right, so that's going to turn it now into a piece of geometry. So you can see I get all my options, and now the initialized state is now more of our quick quick cube, quick cylinder. So now what I'm going to do is turn on my array. Do the same thing that we've done in the past here. Lock our position and start size. I'm going to turn on the transpose line. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to pull this straight down the center. All right. I want 4 of them. Okay, there's 4 there. I know I'm along the Z profile, so I want to rotate along that Z. Let's say 360 again. And now when I pull down, I get my rings. Right? So I'm just trying to make them so they kind of match a little bit close here. That's good enough. Right? So now the next part is I'm going to go back to my original cylinder here, which again is the primitive, right? Or I like to say the mathematical cylinder. And you can see we have here. And what I'm going to do now is double this number. I'm going to double it to 64. This is why this is really important, this step. Okay, because again, I want to have that perfect C that's perfectly straight and perfect straight there. And the reason why I'm doing 64 is if I want to weld these pieces, you'll see it's going to work out nicely. So I'm going to say make that a poly mesh. Let's go back to my 4 rings, which are an array mesh right now. All right. Now let's open up our subtools and let's append that new one that I made. Okay. So this is now going to become my outer ring. So all I need to do is change the size of this. So I'm just going to switch to scale. I'm going to say, what do I want? And there, that looks nice there. It's a little too wide, so let me do this. And let me see, and I can see that on the flight. That looks great. There, perfect. Okay? And what I'm going to want to do is combine these. But before I do, I need to convert this into geometry. Again, there's 2 ways to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and use the old way here with array mesh, with extrude off. I'm going to make mesh. There's my rings. Okay? I'm going to go back to my subtools. I'm going to go down here to my merge down option. Merge this down. So now I have this. And now all I want is really a quarter of this. Because in essence, that's what those were made out of. They made like little quarters and then they can use them and use them and use them. And so if they wanted to make one that was 4 of these, they would have a piece and they could just say, hey, I want 8 of them. You're going to see here in a second. So what I want to do now is say, I don't need any of that. Okay, and I don't need that. This is all I want. Perfect. Okay, and again, I'm going to just, for the sake for you guys being able to visually see, I'm going to go down to my display properties and hit double. And then I'm going to say, you know what? I don't need these pieces right in here, right? So I'm going to say, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking more for something like that, right? So now I go, all right, let's delete what I'm hiding. So in the geometry, I say delete hidden. Okay. Now I'm going to close these off because I know I'm going to want them closed. So we'll use our handy dandy Z modeler. So we're going to bridge across there, right? And then I'm going to just click that edge, there, that's bridged. Click that edge, and that's bridged. Okay. I definitely want to bridge these across. Okay. But instead of doing the bridging across, I'm actually going to delete these faces right here. I'm going to delete that face, let's say, and that face. Okay? And what I'm going to use instead, all right, is my handy dandy vertex point movements. So this is going to be hovering over the vertex point, okay? And I'm going to stitch 2 points. And I want to do midpoint. So what it's going to do is, as I click on the one here, I'll zoom in real close here so you guys can see, right? And I'll make sure symmetry's not on. I don't need symmetry on for this, right? Okay, there's no need to have that on. Okay, so then I'm going to say, hey, click that point. Oh, I have symmetry on. And click that point. And you'll see it better here. Click that point, and you see it's welding these together. Click that point, right? Oh, I got to get the back one. That point and that point, right? Okay, and then here I just bridged again across here, and here, and here. And then I got a nice start to this piece here, right? And let me get this point again. There, and then I'll bridge here to here, here to here. And then now I just decide, okay, I definitely want to have creasing. Crease here and here. Definitely creasing there, definitely creasing there. Like some creasing there. And in there. And I want just this edge here, creased, creased. Right? And definitely going to want these edges here creased. So we'll crease those as well. So now when I smooth, this is what I start to get. Oh, let me get the other side. And let me close up this side as well. It would have been good for me to have symmetry mode on when I did that, but I didn't. All right, and we'll just bridge those up. There you go, and then now I just crease it again, complete edge loop around. And then now we have this. So we've got a nice start to this. So the next thing I do now is I'm going to want to use this now as an array. And right now if I turn the floor on, you see it's kind of not sitting center. So I want this to be dead center. Right? So again, same things that I've already done before. I'm going to unify it. Right? I'm going to rotate now the center of this. So boop, boop, boop. There you go. And if I unify, there you have it, right? And then now all I got to do is say, all right, we want to now array this again. And this is where we can start having some fun. We're going to say, I want 4. We are along the z-axis for the rotation. So I'm going to say 360. And then now I can just do this. And I can make that like this, right? But I want to now continue playing with this. So now the beauty here now, again, of the array, if I insert multiple mesh, I can do, say, something like this. Then I say QMesh, flat island, right? But I want to do flat island with polygroup. And as I pull it up, I see it happening on the other, all the other ones at the same time, right? I can do something like, let's delete this face here, okay? And then I'm going to say, how about let's use the close option, okay, with arcs and a convex hole, right? So I want to close this up. And I want to have maybe something that does this. So what I'm doing is I'm moving right to left to change how far it's pushing out, and up and down is using the spans. See, up and down is getting my spans. And now all I got to do is update my creasing, which go to crease, update that. There you go. Done. And maybe I don't want to crease that one now. Right? And see, I can change all this on the fly and really see what's happening to my shape as I'm going here. Okay, and so now the next thing maybe I want to do is, well, what if I want 8? See, now you can start playing and making some very unique shapes that you probably I wasn't able to do just using array to give me some kind of crazy results. And this is how I started getting some fun stuff and really working with this. And of course, if I change it to 8, right, and then we just start messing with this, I can start creating crazy stuff like this. I started doing one like this. Right? And then because I have symmetry capability, right, there's many other things I can do. I could even, if I wanted to, clip this, right? And then I have symmetry on. I can even start clipping across, see, and really create very different, unique shapes with this. Okay, and so the last thing that I want to show, what you got to think about, and how I started building this cathedral. I was building one piece on top of a piece on top of a piece, but I wanted it to array around and then also go around the world and be populated around the world at the same time. But I'm not sure what I want. So for example, I switched to my handy dandy train brush here. And this brush has a 6-sided cube on it that I often use. Okay. And I've got symmetry on. So the beauty here is when I draw this out, right? See, it's happening on all of them. So this becomes a very great advantage for me to say, okay, let's Q mesh this now single and say, hey, I want this to come off like that. And now you can see what we're making here. Maybe a little bit more. It's maybe a little bit taller, maybe like this. And then what I decided to do here is I said, hey, let's go ahead and delete those single polygons. Okay. And now again, I'm going to use our handy dandy bridging tool, but I'm going to say 2 holes. So there's a hole on one side and there's a hole on another side. I've turned symmetry off. Okay. And then there is so many different ways to do this. Okay. So I'm going to say, all right, let's look at what does it look like if it's a circle? So I click on that edge, and I can see, again, up and down spans, okay? Left and right is changing the height, right? And so I can see, oh, that's a beautiful flower, right? But maybe I don't want to use rounded, okay? Maybe I want to use, I don't know, what is tight round corners going to look like? So I click on this, and then I move, and then see, you get a completely different looking shape. I don't like that one. And then maybe I want to try, maybe what are the arcs look like? I can click on this one, and then click on this one, right? And now you've got maybe something more like that, 4-leaf clover like kind of a look. So this is all I did constantly on this piece, right? And then what I ended up doing was turn this all into a brush, right? So here, let me load my brush. Okay, and here I'll switch to a plane, right? So again, I'm using array mesh to do something else, not just to create the environment piece itself, but using it to create brushes. So you can see what I have here are various pieces. So I have just the round piece that's an individual. I have the 4 one. I have one that's a 6 clover. There's one that's the 6. Here's one that's 8. And then here's one that's 16. So now all I got to do is click on these, right? And I can draw them out as many times as I want. I can make them all be the same size, right? I can swap and say, I don't want that one. I want this 6 one. So I did a lot of playing and putting these and saying, what's is working, what's not working, right? Then of course now if we go back to the idea of the array idea, right? As I put this here, it happens on all of them, right? So as I'm drawing here and say, oh, on this corner, I want to have the 16 one. And you know what? I want to have it on both sides exactly the same, like that. And then there you go. And the beauty again is array mesh, okay, is instancing, right? So we're still doing array. The polygon's changing only based on these because nothing's happening in here, right? And as I start manipulating and playing with this more, right, and say, oh, polygon, and say, hey, let's Q mesh that. Yeah. See, and I can see it happening everywhere. And then I can continue to manipulate and play with my shapes that I'm making here. Right? Again, you see the advantage here of me knowing that white circle. So I can even change this a little bit. Right? And then now, because of Q mesh, what it can do, see that's all welded now. So that's all a nice shape.
Got about
yeah, I'm pretty much finitoed. So we can take the questions for that have popped up along the way in my rantness that's happening.
Can you show how to do an insert mesh and have it hold scale using control? So you can change the draw size and draw it out at the same size.
Sure. Let's do polyloop flat. Let's put this.
Because you had your cube and you were drawing them out.
I'm gonna put them in here. Okay, so I have. Let's go back to my brushes. Let's select my handy dandy little disc brush that I made. Right, and let's say, hey, I want to use the 4 one. Okay, and I want to draw them out, and I want them to be this big. right? So clearly I want them to be symmetrical, right? When I draw it out, so I want more than one. And then I want it to draw it out again, it's the same size. Okay, so I can find the size. So if you look at the draw size, if I want it to kind of fill the space, I find the draw size that works for me, which is right about there. And see, now it's filling the space. So it's all based upon your draw size. So I'm just holding control when I drag out. So again, I'm just clicking and I'm getting the exact same one, and I can rotate it and be off centered a little bit because it wouldn't be maybe placed in the exact same way or location. If I did want it in the same location, here's the advantage of the transpose line again for you guys. So when you insert something, everything gets masked but the mesh that you've inserted, right? And so again, this is the beauty of the array mesh. I get to design and see this on the fly. So what I often do is I'll use the snapping of the transpose line. So I'll click on this point, click on that point. And you see what it's doing? It's snapping perfectly along that edge, right? So it's the same thing. If I went to this, boom, it snaps. So why is that important? Because then what I can do is duplicate along the even exact same, in essence, angle going across there. And now those three are all sitting in the same spot, right? They're all in the same line and path. And then that's how, I can step back and take a look at, am I digging this? Am I really liking this? I probably need some creasing. So that's how you use the control key to keep your insert mesh brushes the same size. Next question. Oh, wow.
Oh, we got. You got your image of the full cathedral again?
The model or the image? Which one do you want? I've got it all.
If you have the model, pull the model
Sure.
up. But
I can pull the model up. All right, let me grab that model. Cathedral. Yep. Wait for it. It's pretty big. Well, what I ended up doing actually with this one is I started getting crazy with surface noises, and I started converting all the geometry. So this one is 102 million polygons. So I have an array state version, but I'm showing you guys the version that I started going crazy and actually turning everything into the geometry itself. So it's going to take a second to load 102 million polygons. While that's loading, any other question coming through? We're good to go.
Pretty much good to go. We have some for decreasing resolution. You can use Decimation Master. Tell them where that is quick.
Decimation Master is in your Z plugs. Right, and you got your Decimation Master here. So you can decimate items down and reduce the polygon count, and then keep the sculpt and keep everything together in there. So this is my cathedral, which part of it, which is all array mesh. So I really only built this front part is all I built. And then I just arrayed it around. Everything's arrayed around. Arrayed around. So, and then I'm using surface noise to do the bricks. So we'll get in close here. I don't know how the movement is for on your guys' side. So there you go. So see all this right here, all these. This is actually just one row of polygons, and that's surface noise. This is surface noise. But then I see all this. This is arrayed. All that is arrayed. All this down here is arrayed. Sure, let me get in closer down there. All these pieces right here are arrayed. So here we can just look really quickly at these. Let's actually take one of those pieces. Here, let's just select it. All right, so this, you can see this is all arrayed. So, but I only built the one, right? So here, so an example, here's another way to be using the array mesh, okay? Here, I'm just gonna clone it so we're just looking at just this guy. And I only really care about this one. So just that.
On average, how many arrays do you think you did for that?
I had probably up to about 100 arrays total. Like each subtool was an array, and then there was another array, and then some of them had a third or fourth array to it. So for an example here, right? So I just built this piece, right? But this is the beauty again of array mesh. As I was building it, right, I started with just a cube. But when I had just the cube, I turned on array, right? And then I said, this is the time I did turn on that transpose option right away, okay? And I said, I want it to array this way. And then I said, how many do I want? And then I found the distance first of how I wanted that. So I had it going across my cathedral first, right? And then now I started building all of this, and then I watched it populate along the whole thing. I can pull back and look at it and see if that's what I wanted, right? So if you think about combining everything I've been talking about, I could even, again, going back, taking this a step further, turning this into a brush, right? I can say create insert, new, right? Now I got this. And then I was literally just, again, just keeping it simple just so you guys get the idea here, right? Drawing this out and saying, hey, I want this one to draw out like this, right? And then now that I have that, I split it. Okay, I went here and split unmasked points, and now I had just this piece. Okay, and then I said, how many do I want to array across? So I turned my array on, turn all these options on. I said, all right, it's going to move this way, and then repeat how many times. Right, so that's all I did for a lot, almost all this in this cathedral. So that's how I did this. I just started with one cube, and it was just 6-sided cube, started splitting it, merging, and then just I did the array first before I did anything. So I positioned the cube where it needed to go, and then just arrayed it across.
All right. Got anything else? I think
we'll go all the same thing with this too. I only made one of these arches, and then I arrayed it over, and then I made another subtool of the doors and had it right over with the exact same array. So eventually what happened, right, when I started doing this, right, we'll go back to this one. I had a stored array then that I would load. Okay, so I only had to really do the array once, right? So if I had this one piece, right, let's just say we'll make this a mesh, okay? And now I wanted to array in the 4-piece thing that I did. I could turn on array and then open and then use this array. And obviously this offset's not the same as but you can see it's going around. And I just had that. And then for every single subtool, I loaded the exact same array and the exact same array. Right, so here I'll push them closer together so you guys can see, because they're way off in the distance right now. Right, so then there you go. Just gives you guys the idea. Right, and then that I just saved that array out and then kept using it and using it. Right, and then if I want to change anything, I can do it like this if I want changing my pivot point. And then it's only these 3 are copies now. And really the only thing that's being used is this. All right. I think that's it, unless there's another question or comments or concerns.
That's what we got right now. So we're over our time slot a little bit.
That's all right.
So that's the array mesh.
But the key thing here, guys, I want you to understand about the array mesh is think about using it for like I did. I started building an environment piece and using it. But think of using it to build pieces of the environment and then arraying that, or using it like I did, using it, turning it into an actual brush and using that for the piece that I had. So it's a lot of fun when you start playing with it and you start messing with it. It can be a ton of fun for sure. That's it from Hollywood. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks for going in. And again, I'm going to try and get images up for you guys, some breakdown images on a thread on ZBrush Central, so you guys can have also images there to look at.
Yeah, I sent them a link to your thread. It's in the chat there. Also, don't forget about the summit that's coming up, and if the vote for the ZBrush
Awards. Vote for these awards. There's some great stuff going up. So anytime you guys see an image go up on ZBrush Central, just click the vote button and it goes in the pool. We'll have the same categories as we did last year, but we thought this would be easier for you guys. You could just click and then we'll categorize in the right categories where they need to be. So there's some great stuff. Thanks for posting. For all those that are posting, there's some really great stuff that's coming up on here. And don't forget about if you want to submit for the Sculpt Off that's live here, okay, at the summit, make sure you're doing that as well. Okay, so you just go to our summit page again, and then down here, you can either register if you want, right? Or answer the call. Answer the call to ZBrush Wild. Okay.
And it's free to attend the summit too.
Everything's free except for the workshops. So, and we've got a great lineup coming. It's we'll be making announcements down the road within the next 5 months of who our presenters will be, because it's already in 5 months. Time is flying by. That's it from myself. Thanks for joining. Mr. Druss, thanks for moderating, and everyone else that's here with the Pixelogic team for chipping in and moderating and helping out with everything. Hopefully that gets you guys some inspiration to start playing with some array mesh, thinking of different ways to do it. And we'd love to see what you're doing with it.
Yeah, definitely post them if you guys start playing with it. So.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the World Wide Web.